Hello to everyone. Welcome to Impact on the Ground with Tia. I'm the CEO of a Tech for Good company and passionate about making difference. This podcast series will dig deeper into what it means to make impactful change in society, and whether you are an individual, charity, social enterprise representative, company, grant maker, or government body, I hope you will enjoy these conversations. We focus on the dynamics between those who have resources to give and those who actually do the beneficiary work and tackle the challenges in our society. So today here at Impact on the Ground, we have two guests and they represent Conservation Collective. We are celebrating here now the Environment Day. And this year, 2021, the theme is nature restoration, and the Conservation Collective is very up for this restoration work in the UK, but also around the globe. So today we have here two guests from the collective, and we have Jade and we have Vinod. And Vinod is actually participating to this call from Sri Lanka, which is exciting. Hello, Vinod. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here, Tila. My name is Vinod Malwatta, and I am a conservationist based in Sri Lanka. I'm the current executive director of the Lanka Environment Fund. So we're part of the Conservation Collective. Jade will introduce the Conservation Collective, but we are one of the affiliate members of the collective, one of many different organizations around the world that sits under the umbrella of the Conservation Collective. Lanka Environment Fund came about in 2019. So we're somewhat new in the space in Sri Lanka, but we've been doing some very exciting work over the last few years that I would love to share with you all over the course of this podcast.
Okay, cool. So Jade, welcome. Could you introduce yourself and the collective as a rooftop organization?
Mm-hmm. Hi, I'm Jade Brudenell. I'm the Executive Director of the Conservation Collective, which is a network of local environment foundations based all over the world, from Sri Lanka to Devon to Barbados. So we have 12 members at the moment and a kind of growing pipeline of, maybe another 6 under development. We tap into kind of mankind's natural instinct to protect what they love. So we build these organizations to raise money from people and businesses with strong connections to a particular place in order to give that money out via a kind of well-informed and passionate local individual like Vinod to the best local campaigns, projects, initiatives, and organizations that are working to tackle climate change, restore nature, and protect the environment.
Okay, cool. That's a kind of a, I would say, new model. I haven't, really got to know many of these collectives. So you operate like as a fundraiser and resource raiser element, and are you also kind of looking into the impact and kind of do due diligence on the individuals and organizations doing the work on the ground?
Yeah, so we I guess we are quite kind of innovative in our approach in terms of focusing on place-based models in particular. Our main kind of drive at the beginning was opportunity-led. It was focusing on where we can increase flows of funding. It's a massively underfunded space, grassroots conservation. Less than 3% of global philanthropic funding goes to the environment. And we think that, or we feel like we have kind of tried and tested now that this model is a good way to attract new supporters to much needed critical projects. So our role is to seed and support the development of new foundations, kind of following this tried and tested framework, but also to strengthen and support existing members. So making fundraising introductions and connections to groups like Vinod's, who we know might be interested in a particular topic, not just the place-based angle, but maybe people who are looking specifically for mangrove or for kind of other thematics that they're working on. Yeah. I don't know if Vinod wants to say something more to the kind of due diligence he's doing.
Yeah, so Vinod, could you tell us what your foundation specifically does, and what is your passion, and mission behind this all?
With the Environment Fund, what as Jade kind of pointed out, what we try to do is fundraise. So we almost are like a conduit, we'll say, for international as well as local fundraising. So what we try to do is connect fundraisers or people who are interested in the environment with actually the conservation professionals working on the front lines. So it's a very underfunded space. So what we try to do is my role is fundraising as well as finding the appropriate projects to access that funding. So we work across 4 thematic areas. We have terrestrial ecosystem conservation, marine conservation, which is a very big proponent of our work in Sri Lanka, given we're an island nation. And then we have effective waste management and responsible tourism. So we kind of have projects across these 4 areas that we work on. And our main goal is actually, as an organization, is to empower local communities as well as local conservationists on the ground to continue the work that they've been doing, and also try to act as a facilitator as much as possible from a global level. So like Jade said, if there are international players interested in working in Sri Lanka, we try to act as a conduit, like I said, to facilitate the knowledge transfer, fundraising, or even just offering local expertise, because sometimes we don't have that kind of local expertise in Sri Lanka, with the conservation field somewhat new in a developing country like ours.
Yeah. So, what I've learned, at least in the UK, because we've been trying to attract lots of environmental charities and social enterprises to our platform, What Impact. And it seems that sometimes, the environmental charities, they just have to be very big ones because the problems are so big, like climate change. So you kind of think that, the tiniest charity, can they really, do something about it? But I think, you are just proving it opposite, that there are lots of small operators who can do bits and pieces, like in your case, restoring and very like local specific restoration work, and also I assume also mindset change if you're working with responsible tourism. So would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so I mean, to that point, it's funny that you brought that up, because at least I'm like a one-man team here in Sri Lanka. So like it's just me who does a lot of the things. But what we've been doing is we found that also being kind of like a facilitator or a coordinator, we're not really stepping on anyone's toes as an implementing organization. We provide grants for people, as well as we kind of facilitate the conversations, put people in the room, and act as a coordinator, like I said. So because of that, we've been able to facilitate a lot of and build on coalitions. That's one of the main strategies that we've actually used. Like you said, a lot of the problems in the environmental space are very complex. And what we're finding is no one organization can address all of those problems. So you're almost better off actually building these coalitions and working together, because what we might be good at, our skill set might not be the skill set that another organization has, but that organization might have the skill set needed to attack that problem. So our philosophy is empower the people who are really good at doing what they do, and provide them with the other pieces in that jigsaw puzzle, so we can kind of work towards achieving a greater good, or like a bigger environmental goal.
Jade, would you like to comment on, kind of how kind of this idea came about? Because you have the UK-based like restoration and nature-related foundations that you work with, but then there are Barbados, St. Vincent, and kind of how are they interconnected?
So I mean, the kind of common linchpin is that they are members of our network, because our founder, Ben Goldsmith, who is a kind of UK-based environmental investor and philanthropist, set up the first foundation in Ibiza just over 11 years ago. It happened completely organically with a group of friends, where they spotted the stark difference between the kind of starkly overdeveloped southern coastlines and the really beautiful, wild, natural northern coastlines, and thought, hang on a minute, who's doing anything to stop this kind of encroachment and overdevelopment moving north? At the time, very, very little funding on the island was given to local groups, but there's a huge amount of money. There's a huge amount of foreigners with second homes. There's a huge amount of hotels. Still today, they're developing new 5-star hotels all the time. People on these super yachts turn up all the time, and none of them were really thinking, I want to be doing this in 10 years' time, and what's it going to look like? So Ibiza Preservation, was set up and has made some really amazing impact on the island, from, really being the facilitator that created a group that's managed to pass a law to stop oil prospecting in the waters around Ibiza and Formentera, to creating new marine protected areas and kind of really raising awareness of the importance of protecting Posidonia, which is the kind of carbon storing, really incredible Mediterranean seagrass. So they, I think, bring in about, or they had been bringing in just over €500,000 a year, kind of maybe pre-COVID. But, I think that was sort of the launch pad that made other friends of Ben's come to him and say, hey, I've got a place in Mastique or the Aeolian Islands. I'd like to do something there. And after it kind of was more of a reactive thing, Ben and I, who'd worked together in the past, thought, oh, maybe we can take this as a model and go to people and say, what about doing this in different parts of the Mediterranean? And we're kind of really excited now by the idea of building these kind of regional groupings, so we've got a couple in the Caribbean and to bring in a few more in the Caribbean, so that those local directors can really work together and see if something's working. If there's a kind of really great coral protection program going on in Barbados, they can share intel with the local groups in St. Vincent. And likewise in the Med and in the UK and in the kind of Indian Ocean, we'd like to see those little regional hubs grow up together. And we'd like to be the kind of facilitator that makes it easy for people to come together, to hold kind of annual workshops, to be a bit of a knowledge center, to share these best practices. And as Vinod said, to kind of prevent reinventing the wheel, but also to make sure that these kind of skills are transferred.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the scaling here is important. Not only in fundraising, getting the support, but the actual work, like you said, reinventing the wheel is not, it's not smart and not good use of resources. So what kind of companies are supporting you, and what are they giving to you? Is it money, or do they support you also otherwise?
So our corporate supporters are a bit of a range, I'd say, for the most part, and because we have evolved to be predominantly in kind of high touristic areas, hotels and restaurants are a low-hanging fruit. They're the people we kind of go to first to really show them how and why they should be supporting the future of the local environment around them. We have set up schemes in the past, which we called €1 for the environment. So hotels and restaurants adding €1 to the bill. If you're in a really amazing beach bar in Greece and spending $100 on a bottle of champagne, if €1 is added to your bill, hopefully that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But actually, we've had some great successes through these slightly sort of creative brand partnerships. We had a pizza restaurant in London that raised something like €25,000 over a summer by creating a Aeolian pizza. So we've got some kind of corporate partnerships like that. I think wherever we are raising funds from them for projects, we're also looking at ways to encourage them to adopt more responsible practices, to sign up to reduce single-use plastics, to encourage them to really think about where they're sourcing their fish from, and from, to encourage them to kind of support local producers and buy local products.
You are also consulting them in sustainable
or less consulting and more connecting them with those on the ground who really have the answers to these problems. But we have a real diverse selection of corporate supporters. We have a barefoot running shoe company in Devon, who the family are from Devon, so they're interested in that area. But equally, the Devon Environment Foundation is supporting a pilot project, which is a seaweed farm. And, seaweed is kind of being piped as this food of the future, but it's also, got potential for use in packaging, for using feedstock for livestock, for use in, potentially in even footwear and different materials. So they're kind of supporting the local foundation, but they also want an eye into what's going on in terms of some of these more innovative programs.
I mean, this kind of like a shared value thinking, like even creating business opportunities for some of these companies and so on. That's amazing. It's really lovely to hear, because we always talk in what impact, that it's not about the status of an organization, whether charity, social enterprise. There has to be just different kind of organizations collaborating, and it's not just that the charities are given out of pity, or kind of we're just helping these charities. Charities have so much knowledge and skills, and they can really help also businesses to innovate and get access to certain data and so on. So I think it's amazing that you are already doing that. And we want to be very advocates of this kind of collaboration. So Vinod, what do you have organizations from the UK who are supporting your foundation?
Well, our model has been a little different, we'll say, in Sri Lanka. I mean, Sri Lanka was very high on the, we were doing very well in tourism, but, in 2019, we had the Easter bombings that happened, in 2020, COVID, and, the repercussions of the pandemic. It's kind of, Sri Lanka has seen a spike in COVID numbers recently. So tourism, again, is kind of on the down. So our model's been a little different, but we've had a lot of people from the UK who have businesses in Sri Lanka, who have been interested or who have connected us to other people. So there is a lot of people come back, but it's mainly been private philanthropic donations that we've been working with. We haven't really formed any private partnership, like public partnerships with, we'll say a company based in the UK or anything like that. But we have had UK citizens who have an interest in Sri Lanka, who have come to Sri Lanka, who potentially set up a business in Sri Lanka, who've been donating to the fund and been involved in it. So that's a way that people have been involved in it.
So Jade, if now any company wants to collaborate with you, what are the resources you need? What of course, money is always wanted. And
so money is an obvious one, and we have been lucky enough recently to secure some funding through 1% for the Planet, which I think is a really brilliant scheme, where corporates sign up to give 1% of their operating model or revenue, operating profit, can't remember, but and then they get to pick approved charities, and so at least a couple of us now are members of that. And we've recently had some funding from an online ethical skincare brand. And I think what we want, as well as funding, is awareness. And within our network, and this is where I think we work well with corporates as well, we have some incredible stories about local environmental champions, people who really are at the kind of coalface of some of the biggest issues, and who have the passion and the drive to solve these issues. And we have these stories, and we're finding more and more, that corporates would have the ability to help us tell them. So Naturissimo, who we've partnered with, have 60,000 subscribers to their newsletter. I think we've got about 1.5, because we're a much kind of younger and smaller group. And, this is fantastic that we can start to champion and raise awareness, and hopefully then raise the impact of some of the local partners. So I think it's that joint marketing and awareness raising potential. And going forwards to next year, hopefully we'll be able to get back into doing events and working together in that space as well, to kind of bring stories to light.
Can people volunteer otherwise than fundraise? Do you have like skills volunteering, or just volunteering like opportunities?
I think lots of the local foundations and have their own volunteering schemes, kind of linked to helping coordinate beach cleanups, linking to help sometimes run social media accounts. Like Vinod was saying, it's a one-man band running about 10 jobs, I think, running an organization, fundraising, grant management. In a bigger charity, Vinod would be a team of 15. So, volunteers with useful skill sets is fantastic. And I'll let him speak more to that in a second. A story I liked recently is that we have a new corporate partner with an architect firm in Devon, and the UK run a match funding campaign for the environment called the Big Give, and it's the Green Match Fund. And so we had a 10,000 match target, and if Devon Environment Foundation, and actually our Scottish fund in the Highlands and Islands as well, if they could reach 10,000, then that would be matched. And the architect's firm did a bake sale, and you had to create a cake inspired by something natural from Devon. So there were some, beavers, rivers, kind of coastlines. And, you don't think a bake sale can raise that much money, but they raised 250 quid, and then the company matched 250 quid. So then that 500 was donated and the 500 was matched. So that simple little bake sale made £1,000, which can go towards, some of the wonderful projects they're supporting. So I think that's a nice way of companies actually involving their employees. I don't know if Vinod, do you want to say a bit more about?
Yeah, how can people volunteer? Can group of people from UK, for instance, travel to Sri Lanka and volunteer?
I mean, yeah, obviously we'd love for that, for like stuff like that when it is possible, because there are a lot of like opportunities in Sri Lanka, like Jake said, we'll say cleanups is a simple one, but we're going through a lot of we're doing a lot of mangrove restoration work and getting into that space. So that's something that people can be involved in. But interestingly, we've also had people we're currently doing a kind of a new marketing brochure, or like a pitch document, if you will, what we're giving out to people, and someone's basically come on board and said, hey, I don't have, I'm really passionate about the environment, but I don't have the necessary funding to make sure, but I do have this skill set of being really good at being a graphic designer and being able to put a pitch deck together. So that's been super helpful for us to have almost like technical expertise, someone who would have, we would have had to pay to do our brochure or maintain our website, to run a social media campaign, who's come on board and said, I would like to give back to the environment, and this is how I'm going to do it. So there could be people even based in the UK, who have a skill that they're really good at and that they want to mobilize for environmental cause, where they can reach out to us and say, hey, we'd love to do something for you all with your website. I noticed your website, could be a little bit more interactive. Maybe there are ways like that, or, maybe I could do something for you all on a social media account. I could draw for you all to create a very interactive campaign. There were so many very interesting ways that we want to look at things. And I think there's so much media inundation these days, it's always good to think outside the box and see you can, and as Jade said, just getting that awareness out there is a big step. As the more people know about some of the issues, the more kind of that thinking gets in line with, how we need to change as a collective,
Yeah. And I think,
can I say one last thing on that? I just had an idea of what I'm seeing quite a lot more about as well is applications for grants from the local foundations for citizen science projects. And I think that's a really great way for people to get involved. So it's, recently in Tuscany, there was a biodiversity census, and everyone was encouraged to download an app called iNaturalist. And over the weekend, take a picture of every time you saw a specific type of butterfly or bird, and kind of upload that to the system, which is then starting to look at kind of counting populations. And, it's as much as if you're out on a boat in the Med taking pictures of pods of dolphins or kind of cetaceans, or the kind of to be able to enable scientists to monitor the seagrass health. I think that's a really great way that all of us can get involved.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people in with corporate skills don't realize how valuable their skills are for charities, that people in charities are dedicated to the cause, not necessarily finance experts or marketing professionals and so on, and it can change the life of a charity if they get lots of skills, because then they can help charity fundraise and really raise the awareness, and I think that should be celebrated more. Of course, in terms of company or corporate employees that might feel that I'm doing the same thing as a volunteer that I'm doing at work.
Yeah.
But then, maybe somebody wants to rather go to the nature and, clean the beach. But in terms of skills, it's still so much more valuable, for the charity, because they will have to pay for it otherwise. So there is a huge cost saving involved. But let's talk about your impact. How do you monitor your impact, Vinod? What kind of methods do you use to, monitor what you have achieved?
So it depends on the project. So we've been doing a number of different projects. So I can just talk about our latest project that we're looking at, which is a trilingual digital awareness campaign. So for that, for example, what we're looking at doing is actually looking at how many, just the social media statistics and how much reach we're getting across media platforms. So that's the most straightforward one, because it is a very digital interfaces. It's much easier to quantify, and the metrics do come out from these sites that you run these on. But we've got another interesting one with biodiversity corridors, that we're creating 2 new biodiversity corridors in the country. And that one will say it's a little bit more tricky, because what we're looking at doing is, I mean, how do you quantify the creation of those areas? So we're looking at kind of bigger scale. So for example, the partner that we're working with has been told to come on board to create more corridors similar to that. So for us, that's a huge win, we'll say, because that means the model that we've funded has been recognized as a very accepted model, and they want replicability. So that's one of the main things, how we quantify some of the impact we've been doing. If there's replicability and we can ensure that there's progression of the project, because then you link one corridor to a second one, to a third one, and then you start creating stepping stones through an environment. So that's one way we look at it. So it's just really dependent on the project and how we do it. We've got another project that we're looking at. It's a 3-year project, and that one's policy recommendations to the government. And the impact on that will be measured, how much of the policy recommendations actually uptake and passed into legislation, and how that region after that will have a baseline study. And then we'll also look at that study period again at the end of it. So we'll be able to see over the course of the 3 years, once we've implemented these solutions to the problem, has there actually been a impact that's happened after the project was initiated to when it ended. So having that baseline study and having a study at the end helps us quantify what our project has achieved during that time.
Yeah. So if this the challenge, Jade, you said that was it 3% of the funding goes to environmental causes. Is this the challenge, quantifying the impact? Because it's in environment, it's not like a finger.
It's not as simple as saying, I raised $1 billion to build a hospital and here's the hospital. It does take more digging. I think, we've got a plethora of incredible examples of species protected or habitats protected or policies changed or people educated. But how do you bring that all together? So we have been working with a consultant here in the UK called New Philanthropic Capital. We're working on a theory of change at the moment, which will really kind of consolidate and test some of the assumptions that we've been making over the last couple of years about the efficacy of our work. And what we're hoping to be able to do is to pull out some kind of standard methodology across the group and put some key performance indicators in there. It's difficult because, whilst we're all focused on long-term net conservation gain and nature restoration, there are a lot of other kind of values-based metrics, such as awareness raising, behavioral change, education, policy change. And I think, we will do our best to kind of find a set of standard common indicators, but also acknowledge that there is a huge amount of almost unmeasurable value that Vinod and his counterparts around the world bring to these local organizations. So, capacity building, encouraging, I guess, the development of green jobs in the kind of long term. So watch this space for the Conservation Collective's first kind of group impact report, but hopefully we'll have something next year.
Yeah, that's a very interesting theory of change and social impact logic model, very familiar to us, and what impact our impact reporting tool. It's not measurement, but reporting tool is an extensive product. Mm-hmm. So I hope that you will benefit from it, and we can set another call about it. I introduce it to you, but that would help you to also then collect, your annual maybe own like impact report, and that can be specified for each project. So even Vinod, you could be reporting on all of your projects separately, and it relies on theory of change and the logic model, and but like you said, that many impact kind of results are kind of qualitative.
Mm.
So there are not everything, not nature, not even well-being, health, whatever the cause is. It's not a quantitative. Of
But
course,
I think that helps the I think that's why we like this local approach, because as you said, trying to kind of move the dial on the 3% of environmental giving. I think many of our donors, if you went to them and said, help us combat tropical deforestation or save the orangutans, or these kind of things that we all know need to be addressed, but they feel so far-fetched, and they feel like, how can I do that with my $10,000-$15,000?
yeah.
But if you say to them, have you noticed the amount of plastic washing up in the shore where you live? Have you noticed that there's nowhere to refill your water bottle? Some of the more kind of consumer, the things that we all face in our day-to-day life, or that the recycling is rubbish, even here in Hampshire. That's where you can start with these local organizations to make changes and then show real impact that affects you in your own life.
Yes, definitely. So Vinod, would you mind showing us around? Because I heard that there was like a storm thundering behind you. Just where are you? What's the
So I'm actually at home in the Eastern Province where I live. This is outside.
Ooh, beautiful.
Yeah, there's a bit of a storm coming in.
Yeah. Well, great. So anyway, any like a end note for the Environment Day? What do you wish to say to all the podcast listeners? Vinod, if you start.
From my point of view, what I would like to say is, like, I think everyone needs to like also understand, I guess, that we're all interconnected, and how like consumption, or we'll say behavioral choices, or just any kind of choices people make in one part of the world has repercussions in other parts of the world. It could be positive and it could be negative, but I think it's something that we should all keep on board, that everyone is interconnected and it is kind of one earth that we're looking at. So that for me, it's like that's the biggest one. And I've seen a lot of power of collaboration happening in Sri Lanka and other places, and there's been a lot that's been achieved through collaboration. So I think like just keeping like understanding that things do work in systems, I think is super important, and that your choices at home do matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, great. Jade.
Well, I think as a kind of network, but hopefully more as a population, we really do embody that think or act local, dream global. I think that's kind of really important. So I would encourage people to support your local wildlife organization. If you're here in the UK, the wildlife trusts are everywhere and amazing. And if you're, if you have a particular place in the world that you feel strongly and passionately about, then grab a group of friends and come see us, and let's see if we can get a new local conservation collective foundation set up. And I think from a more on a personal side of things, it's kind of, get close to nature yourself, get your children interested and excited, because that kind of stewardship is how we get people to care and how we get people to act. Write to your local MP when you see another illegal development going up on a water meadow. Share petitions, get involved, actually be an active citizen.
Yeah, and that's sometimes kind of probably forgotten, how much legislation helps in certain aspects of any cause. Legislation is not always helpful, but then again, in certain things, when things are a must, then things start to happen. If you think about the plastic bag, initiative and these kind of things, sometimes it's not only trying to pursuing people to do something. Sometimes the legislation is a key part, and also operators like you who are trying to influence by lobbying and stuff are very important. Although it might seem that you're funding admin work, or just some people in the office lobbying, and it doesn't have an instant impact, but one change in legislation can suddenly change everything eventually. So that's, I think, also a good thing to keep in mind when companies are looking for organizations to support, that lobbying sometimes is also the most impactful thing. Yeah, but of course it requires all what you said, the awareness, the interest, the passion, kind of, otherwise, nothing will happen even in legislation. People have to be aware of things and kind of feel passionate about it. Anyway, happy Environment Day for you.
Thank you very much
for this conversation, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you so much, Dilla. Thank you.
Good to meet you.